Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's now my pleasure to ask Josephine Ouédraogo to take the floor and take us through the keynote speech on the topic that I've already indicated to you. Josephine.
Thank you. Monsieur le vice-président de la conférence,
distinguished Vice Chair of the conference, honorable ministers, distinguished representative of the Director General of UNESCO, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to prefer my sincere thanks to the organizers of CONFINTEA 6 for giving me the great honor of presenting the topic of the day on behalf of Enda Monde. The role given to civil society in CONFINTEA is a very encouraging sign, because today one cannot possibly tackle any development-related challenge in our countries without sustained dialogue and strong partnership between all the different players in the government sector, the private sector, and in civil society. CONFINTEA 6, like all preceding conferences, is an opportunity to share, to learn, and to take decisions. And indeed, the very venue of this major meeting, South America, the state of Pará in particular, a source of innovation and call for even stronger political commitment. Indeed, it was through historical struggles that many countries on this continent were able to move towards democracy, recognition of civic rights, and the acceptance of cultural and racial diversity. It was in this very country, Brazil, and in particular Rio de Janeiro, that in 1975, the very first global conference on women was held under the auspices of the United Nations. So indeed, we have a great deal to learn from the experience of South American countries in terms of social and political transformation. And this must be done while encouraging exchange and sharing of information as well as solidarity. Ladies and gentlemen, today's topic is confronting global issues. And we need to put in place more proactive policies for adult education and learning. So first and foremost, may I just give you a brief overview of the current global challenges. A quick analysis of the situation worldwide shows a number of trends that could have a negative impact on the poorest of the poor. 75% of the global population will live in the cities by 2050. By then, there will be 9 billion people on the earth. If nothing changes, the problems of societal, spatial, and economic problems in the megalopolis in the south today will become the daily experience of 6 billion men and women. Most of them will have to deal with problems of segregation in terms of space, life-threatening pollution, all forms of violence, social exclusion, unhygienic housing, and all forms of diseases caused by worsening of living conditions. Demographic growth is not an evil in itself, and Mr. Konare no doubt will agree with me on this, because in some countries a drop in population growth leads to a breakdown of the societal structure, and that also leads to the problem of population renewal. Demographic growth became a problem for planners because it showed the inequality at the very heart of our systems for managing power, managing resources, managing living areas, and managing knowledge. A large population in itself should be seen as a social and economic potential when policies see human beings as the end of their vision and their concept of development. Unfortunately, the economic system worldwide cannot manage demographic growth because it goes against all the parameters of economic liberalism that do not take on board social and human considerations. And that is why the social effects of the global economic system has led to a change in the mapping of poverty. Poverty is no longer limited to the continents and countries of the South, and indeed the most industrialized countries now have a large number of poor people whose situation is extremely difficult because they live next door to the rich. Furthermore, the richer classes in the so-called poor and emerging countries have a living standard that is similar to that of others in the north. Widespread communication is also an important aspect of our context because it goes hand in hand with globalization. In a few hours, you can reach any part of the world and you can get information in real time about any event taking place. And this has taken us further towards the whole concept of the global village. However, this openness in terms of lifestyle, the visibility of the lifestyle of some leads to a lot of frustration among hundreds of millions of young people because they can see very easily that they are excluded from the wealth that others have. Because of this frustration, many choose to emigrate under very difficult conditions, and this is unacceptable because more than ever you have limitations to the movement of people and to migratory flows. Furthermore, for the past 2 centuries, the control of the economy has become a real source of power, but information is the doorway here, and the conditions for mastering this situation are also causing inequality and imbalance. Finally, the growing deterioration of the environment is the outcome of all that I have just mentioned, and thus limited resources are now being used in an unequal fashion by those who control the global economy. In a few days in Copenhagen, we do hope that decisions will be taken that will reduce the extent of the threat faced by humanity. Now, alongside what I have just said about the current situation, there are 3 major challenges faced by our civilization: the climate problem caused by overproduction and pollution, the economic problems caused by financial and economic problems caused by speculation, the goal of which is to make as much money as possible in as short a time as possible for just a handful of people. And then we have the food crisis, faced by 1 billion people who lack the very basic means of existence, in a situation where others are throwing food out because of the extremely mercantile agricultural policies put in place. And one of the aberrations of our time is that in industrialized countries, it takes 100 kilograms of grains and dozens of liters of drinking water to produce 1 kilogram of meat, whereas drinking water, though renewable, is still unavailable to 1.1 billion people on the earth today. Ladies and gentlemen, we are all witnesses of this situation. Because of the crisis, we need to rethink our systems and our policies. the outcome, the major outcome of the phenomena I have just discussed is increasing social tension caused by widespread inequality, the distribution of wealth, of health, and of all that is related to the basic needs of humanity is done in an unfair manner and engenders unprecedented levels of poverty. The war over water in some Latin American countries and the hunger revolts that have taken place over and over again in some countries in the South are a clear demonstration of the tension caused by the existing economic system. In this general context, Sub-Saharan Africa is the one that suffers the most because half of the poor people in the world live in Sub-Saharan Africa, and the number has been growing over the past 25 years. In a recent book, Led Fatal, Dambisa Moyo gives a very strong description of the development models in African system based on aid programs, loans, subsidies, major investments, structural adjustment programs, and finally requirements for democracy and good governance. Even democracy, which is imposed on us, is simply restricted to institutions and systems that our people are not used to. And so democracy is also a way of keeping dictators in power. The author concludes by saying that the outcome of all this is that economic growth has slowed down and poverty has increased, and Africa is now left behind in the race to economic progress. There was a time when we were convinced that education would help to alleviate poverty because it enabled young people and adults to acquire knowledge and acquire the skills required to better participate in development. But today, what we have realized is that quite the opposite. It is precisely the modalities of development that further foster poverty and the exclusion of large numbers of people. And from now on, I believe that it's no longer a matter of trying to catch up with others and trying to close the gap, but because the development models that we are going after, by its very nature, is not accessible to everyone. Under this system, when you feel that you have already achieved the basic level, you realize that you're in danger of losing what you feel you have achieved. And that's why there are hundreds of millions of unemployed persons and people who were formerly at work and highly educated people who have no jobs. What we see is a crisis of thinking and a crisis in terms of economic and political governance. There's a crisis of development models. The models that the countries of the South have latched onto, and they were not part and parcel of developing these models. And so indeed, there is need. What we're looking at here is countries trying to adapt to a system that has already shown its limitations. The system itself is being strangled because it has not been able to take on board the experience and the knowledge of each and everyone, in particular those of adults, irrespective of their culture, their background, and their living conditions. Ladies and gentlemen, so what's the way out? Now, if we agree that our policies and our formal and non-formal educational programs, even though they have helped to raise our living standards, and have helped educated people in their self-development, these policies and programs have not helped the larger numbers of people to come out of poverty. Some efforts have been made. We have had some success, but often they get lost in the errors and the failings of our development model, the political and social impact of this model, as I said earlier, is greater tension because of the large gap between the interests of those who manage the system and the interests of the majority.